Hey everyone, Matt here from Docs Running, and today we're going to do a 100-mile review of the Adidas Prime X Strung 2. So this is technically the third version of the shoe, although it's the second with the strung upper. This series is supposed to be a super max stack height racing shoe, and Adidas still calls this version a racing shoe. I would call this a super training shoe based on the increase in weight that we'll talk about. But regardless, I've done a full review of this before and put some thoughts out on there, but I wanted to update all of you on how it is after 100 miles, talking about has the ride change, upper change, has the durability change? That's the big question. So let's get into this, and let's first start with specs. So I've talked about this before. Men's size 9 is 10.4 ounces. Women's size 8 is 9.9 ounces. Our team's size 9 weighted at 10.7 ounces. My size 10 weighted at 11.5 ounces. So definitely not, in my mind, in the racing shoe weight, although some people might disagree with me based on its responsiveness. The whole thing was redone, so totally different upper, although it is still strung, totally different sole setup. So we'll talk about all these things and how they may or may not have changed. But first thing I gotta talk about is the upper has remained consistent since the beginning, where it's a little bit stiffer, not stiffer, but it's just different than the original version of the strung, where very low in the toe box. The original, the Prime X Strung 1, i.e. Prime X 2, had a little bit more volume and length. This version fits very true to size, so I wouldn't go a half size down like I probably should have in the previous version, and it sits very low. Midfoot is very normal in width. It's not super secure because there's not a lot of overlays here, and then the heel fits normal to slightly snug. I did have to lace lock this shoe eventually on my left side because I was getting some heel slippage. There is no heel counter, which I do like, but there wasn't enough security for me as the upper began to break in. When I lace locked it, it was fine. Just be careful not to tie this too tight because it's just a one-piece upper. There's no thick tongue here. It's very thin. So this can put a lot of pressure on the dorsum or the top of your foot. So just be a little careful with that. So fit is starting to loosen up a little bit, especially in the midfoot and heel. Do not turn in the shoe. Go in a straight line. If you go in a straight line, you should be fine, but you might need to lace lock this just a little bit. Sole is also different in many, many ways. We'll talk about how the ride's different and the stability is different. As I said, it's not a racing shoe in my mind. It's a great long run and daily training shoe if you like training in super type shoes. It has been great for long runs though. If you want to hit a consistent pace, be it an easy or an up-tempo pace, this is a great shoe. I love this shoe for long runs on flat surfaces, even some hill stuff. Don't take it on trail, obviously, but I really have enjoyed it for holding a pace on longer efforts. As soon as I try to change pace, that's where it starts to struggle. The 10.4, 10.7, 11.5 ounce weight, whatever you want to call it, it doesn't seem to respond really well. The foam is really, really great, but the weight just keeps me from making this shoe feel like it's nimble enough for me to change pace really quick. So I did some fartlegs earlier, and then as I've kind of worn into the shoe, it doesn't respond that same way. It's still got that same bounce from the Light Strike Pro, the supposedly 3 layers, although I swear this layer is something totally different. But so it doesn't have the same like snappy, like quick responsive. It's just got that nice bounce and like consistent bounce as you go from mile to mile. It doesn't change. It keeps that really well. It's just maybe I was excited when I first got this and I was able to do some fartlek and tempo runs, but now I feel like I can't do that. It really holds a consistent pace well. So if you want something faster, you want a workout like type shoe where you can really hit interval paces, I would definitely use the Adios Pro 3 or even the Adios 8, which is also a solid shoe, or the Takumi Sen. This is more training effort and long runs, and it's really felt like that because there's so much foam underfoot, and again the weight holds you back a little bit, but as long as you're doing up tempo and normal effort, it's totally fine. Forefoot has continued to be a little bit stiff. My calves do get a little bit worked with this because now instead of the rods, it's now the 2 plates that are here, and that definitely does make it stiff. It is breaking in, and once I kind of warm up to the shoe, it rolls along really nice, but this toe spring is pretty aggressive. I mean, that was previous Adios Pro shoes kind of had something, the original had something similar. It just takes a second for me to figure out how to use this. Once I get into it and I remember, totally fine. I can just cruise for miles. It feels really good as long as I don't have to change the pace too much. Stability wise, this is where I need to update this a little bit. So I said at the very beginning, it feels like there's a lot of medial or lateral bias in this shoe, and I stand by that comment. If you look at this, and if I even this out straight, you can see there's a medial wedge right there. And that's exactly how this feels. The posterior lateral bevel is massive. And so when I hit this, it really keeps me out this way. For someone like me that needs some heel and midfoot stability, it works really well. For those that go too far lateral, like if you supinate too much and you do not have good control of it, this might be a little rough in the heel. This might bother your peroneal muscles. You might not. There might be a risk of that. Just because, again, the massive lateral heel, like wedge, essentially, and then this extra little piece, but this is actually broken in. I don't feel this as much as the foam is compressed. So definitely this little lateral bias right here. The forefoot, though, very nice and centered. Some very mild sidewalls on each side, and really, obviously, there's no, like, bending to this at all. There's no flexibility at all. So forefoot's very nice and centered, but heel and midfoot for sure, a little bit more lateral biased. Even despite the somewhat relative narrowness here, it still kind of shoves you out a little bit. So those that are sensitive to that, just be careful. Those who like that, you may actually do really well in this shoe. Last thing I want to talk about is durability. And that's where I got to give this shoe massive credit, because this is my left shoe. And for those who have followed or read our reviews, you know that I shred and destroy the posterior lateral section. And after 100 miles, I think it's just like the very top layer of the Continental rubber, I just put like a little bit of rubbing on. After 100 miles, and I've used this shoe for a lot of things, a lot of longer efforts, a lot of harder efforts, just to try to test out how it feels. So durability wise, this shoe is phenomenal. I would say the number of miles you're gonna get out of it is probably equivalent to what it costs. It is very expensive, but I think if this shoe matches your mechanics, it might be something worth looking into, because it's gonna last for a long time and gonna be a great, consistent, long run shoe. So that's kind of my overall opinion of this shoe. Is if you want something with some lateral bias in the heel, if you need a little bit of medial guidance in the rear foot, maybe a little in the midfoot, if you want something really centered in the forefoot, if you want a little bit more flexible upper and something you don't want to have to worry about going side to side if you're going to stay in a straight line, if you want something that just has a little extra room in the midfoot and heel and that doesn't bother you too much, and if you want something that can just hold a consistent pace for a long time and get tons of miles out of the shoe, this might be a good option for you. If any of those things don't sound like what you're looking for, do not go this direction, because it's very, very niched in those kind of things. So Adidas has created a very specific shoe for a very specific purpose. My mind, not racing unless you're racing like an ultra marathon on the road, or maybe a marathon if you want more of a trainer, a little bit more sturdy or heavier shoe. Not heavier, but you know what I mean. But it's an interesting shoe. Is it exactly what I was hoping for from the newest Prime X? No, to be totally honest with you. And maybe I was expecting something like a hybrid between the previous Prime X and the Adios Pro 3, or to keep the lighter weight, but it definitely went up in weight, and now it's more of a daily training shoe. So again, if that's something you like, great. You're definitely gonna get lots of miles out of this, because if this shoe can handle me, it could probably handle you.